Hi, everyone. I am very excited to share this interview with Air Supply's Graham Russell. In this interview, we talked about a number of areas that have never really been explored in detail with Graham. We talked about his songwriting process, we talked about the early days of Air Supply, including the tour with Rod Stewart in 1977. And we also talked about the unreleased Air Supply recordings that we heard in concert but were never released. So I really hope you enjoy this interview. Good morning.
Morning. You're Miriam, right?
I'm Miriam, yes.
Hi, Miriam. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's an honor to see you, and thank you so much. Just to start off.
You're very welcome. It's nice to be talking with you.
Thank you. So just a little bit about me. I live outside of Washington, D.C., and very much a longtime fan. My parents immigrated to the U.S. in the late 60s from India. And
okay.
they, God bless them, drove me everywhere to see you. and
wow.
Air Supply throughout my growing up. So and really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad we were able to put it together.
There's so many of us who have so many questions that have never gotten asked. And it's been fascinating to listen to like Harvey Brownstone. He did an amazing interview with you, and we're learning so much that we never learned before. And so it's incredible. All these questions that have been piling up that the traditional journalists never asked you. So it's been great.
Oh, well, good. Well, I'll be very happy to answer if I can.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start off with your songwriting. I think one thing for many fans like myself is we got introduced to Air Supply from the songs on the radio. But once that opened up the door, and once we got in the door, there was this entire treasure trove of other songs that never made it onto radio. And beautiful songs, and I've Got Your Love and Don't Turn Me Away. And one of the things that always struck me about your songwriting is the diversity. And you look at some songs that were very edgy and rock, Late Again, Dancing with the Mountain, Me Like You. And then on the other side of the spectrum was a Sunset and a My Best Friend and Just Between the Lines. And then there were these kind of complex songs like She's Got the Answer and Vanishing Race. And it always, one of the reasons why so many of us are fans is because of that breadth of your catalog. And I know you've spoken about how you write songs and they come to you quickly, but are you somebody who listens to a lot of different kind of music? Are there bands that have influenced you? Is it the collaborators you're working with? I'd love to understand that breadth and how that comes to you.
Right. Well, it all began such a long time ago for me when I started to write songs. I was 11 years old when I started to put things together, but I really didn't understand what I was doing. And of course, that's a long time ago. So over the years, I've gained a kind of songwriting wisdom, if you like, because apart, we have Air Supply, the band, which everybody loves, which is fantastic, and me too. But then there's the other side. Away from performing is the songwriting side. So it's really split into two genres. There's the band and there's a songwriting thing, which is totally different. So for me, I have really two careers, but my most beloved career is actually writing songs, simply because I've been doing it for such a long time. I've been writing songs for 60 years now, and that's a long time, So I've gathered a lot of information, a lot of different knowledge along the way. But to answer your question, if I can, everything comes to me. I always say in interviews that songwriting for me, it happens very quickly. And it does when I actually push that button and push enter, if you like. But before that, I think about songs for quite some time. For instance, if I feel that the band, the Air Supply needs a certain kind of song, like if for instance, in the encore, we usually do a 3-song encore, and I like to come out with a big hit. Then in the middle, I might put a new song in there, but it's got to be a certain kind. It's got to be an up-tempo song. And then we have finished with All Out of Love, as we already do. So I think about that for a while. Now I think, well, what does the song need to be? Who's going to sing it? And what's the story going to be? And so I think about that for 2 or 3 days, and I go, okay, I think I've got it all sorted out in my mind. But I don't commit to any lyrics or any musical genre at all. I just get all the information that I need. It needs to be this and it needs to be that. And then I just sit down at the piano and I just wait, or I play a guitar. But within a couple of minutes, I just start playing. And what happens is I start playing the song. And it's a weird thing because I start playing a song that I don't know. So it all kind of unfolds and I'm playing it. And I always say to myself, oh, here it is, I'm playing it, you know. And everything comes pretty fast. But also the other side to that is, over the years, I don't listen to a lot of material from other artists, you know. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is, as everybody knows, I grew up with the Beatles. And for me, that's like going to songwriting university. And I'm still a student there. And I've been at that university since I began. You know, I first started to listen to the Beatles in 1963. And, you know, the whole world are Beatles fans. But for some of us that have been there from the very beginning and grew up with them, it's slightly different. It means more to me than just hearing all those incredible songs. I just learned everything that I know from them, from Lennon and McCartney in particular. And so it's not just the Beatles for me, it's just listening to the greatest songwriters ever for me. And having learned as much as I could, and look, I don't copy anybody, but I just learned how they did it, what they did. And I think I went along same lines as they did, because neither of them have any formal training in anything. You know, Lennon didn't, and neither does Paul. And I used to think, God, I don't have any training in anything either. So maybe that's the curse. But eventually I decided that it's actually a blessing. And I'll explain that a little more, because people always ask me, oh, how do you write the song? And I say, you know, I really don't know, because it just comes down and it's just there and I just grab it. But it's all about listening and experiences. You know, I'm a great listener, and where I live is, you know, in a remote area. So I'm not bombarded with traffic, people's chatter and anything like that. I'm allowed to have free reign, so I can sort out these things, the things that are going on mentally for me, you know. And it's all to do with songs. I mean, everything I do is to do with songs. But I don't listen to a lot of things because I'm working on my own songs all the time. At any given moment, I have at least 4 songs that I'm working on. And when I say working on, they're finished, but I go back and I tweak them out, and I go back with the lyrics and I go, oh no, that needs to change. So I've got at least 4 at any moment like that. And, you know, when I'm working on songs, I use, this may sound really kind of amateurish, but I use my phone, you know, the recorder on my phone, to record ideas at any moment. I mean, I can be in a restaurant and then I'll just suddenly hear something that I think, oh, that's interesting, and I'll record it, you know, on my phone. So I've got hundreds of little things on my phone that I go back and I analyze and I think about and go, oh no, I get rid of them all. But then there's usually 1 or 2 in there that are real gems for me. And I'll say, oh, that's going to be a song, and that's going to be a song. So that's how it works for me. It's very unorthodox. But to answer your question, I don't listen to a lot of things because there's not a lot of stuff that I really like. But that may be because I don't hear it, you know. But I spend so much time working on songs, even if I'm sitting down in a chair, my mind's going and I'm thinking, okay, about that song, oh, that word needs to change. So it's an ongoing process that I've grown accustomed to love dearly. And it's a love affair for me that's been going on for 60 years. And I feel very fortunate because I'm able to do what I love. And but I still consider myself a novice. You know, I'm beginning to figure it all out now. So if I'm still around in 20 years, who knows? I will have finally figured it all out, you know. I
But
hope so.
Do you feel like it's evolved? Your songwriting skills have evolved over the years? Because I'm a big fan of your pre Lost in Love recordings. Like I feel like I don't know if you ever go back and listen to it, but your very first album in 1976 in Australia, I thought was a phenomenal record. There was a song in there in particular that I loved called "The Weight Is My Soul." I don't know if you remember it. And it starts with this very cool bass line, and then this guitar kind of weaves in, and the three of you are singing the song at the same time. But you look at that early material, and then you look at how your songwriting, and you've matured as a musician, I'm sure, as well. Do you feel like there's been an evolution to how you've written songs, and has it changed over the years, especially when you think about the early days?
It has changed. I mean, that song in particular and that album in particular, those songs were in fact, they were all songs that I used to play in the folk clubs years before I met Russell. You know, I used to play in folk clubs and I'd get £5 a night, which $5 actually, which was okay. But they were all the songs that I just had written for no reason, just because I needed to do it. So there was no, oh, can you write me a song? So those songs have a different vibe about them.
They do.
And I played them all so many times in folk clubs and pizza parlors. So when it came time for that album, they were already there. And even Love and Other Bruises, I was playing that for a couple of years before we recorded it, before Russell and I met. So that album has a very innocent feel about it. And it's probably my favorite Air Supply album too.
Very cool.
But when Russell, I had the songs, of course, but when Russell and I met, everything fell into place because, I had, Love and Other Bruises, for instance. I would sing it in the folk clubs, but it wasn't until he sang it where everybody went, whoa, what's that? And when we recorded it, I'll never forget in the studio when he was in there singing, and he sang it first take, as he always did then. And we put the orchestra on, which blew my mind. You know, I'd never heard an orchestra in a studio before. And then Russell went in to sing it. And then suddenly that same song just exploded. And there was no way it wasn't going to be a hit. And it didn't matter in Australia then that nobody knew who we were. We didn't have anything. We only had a couple of shows that we were going to do. It didn't matter because we had that track. And it was just explosive. And when everybody that heard it went, whoa, who's this? So the things that matter now in modern day music, in the industry, for instance, you've got to have a great image. You've got to look great. You've got to be able to move, and you've got to have all your social media in place. In those days, in 75, none of that mattered because none of it was there. There was just something that you couldn't stop. And it was that song in particular. And another song on that record that I always loved was Strangers in Love. Awesome. Yeah, I just love that song. And I must say, all the ingredients for that record came together. We had a great band. We had a great guitar player, Mark McEntee, who went on to the Divinals after. He didn't stay with us very long, but he was just brilliant. And of course, and you got his solo on Empty Pages, which was just out of this world, you know. And when people heard that, they went, oh my God, what's going on here? So I think that record, which was a big success in Australia, gave us great hope that we were on the right track. Simple songs, incredible vocals from an incredible singer. And we had this vibe going on. We were very young, and we had this vibe going on. And to quote Russell, he said, we didn't make any mistakes in those days because we didn't know what we were doing. And we really didn't know what we were doing. All we knew was that we had a lot of great songs. We had a great singer in Russell. And we were young, and we had this vibe that we wanted to do something. However, as time went on, the fact that we were singing a lot of big epic ballads worked against us. However, and this is way before we came to the US, however, at that time, we still had that fortitude. we knew it was right. And people would say, when we did shows in Australia in these pubs that just stank of beer and you know, all this weird stuff, and we knew it was going to happen, even though people said, why are you playing all those ballad songs, you know? And at the same time, when we were there, it was AC/DC were playing, and Midnight Oil and In Excess. They were all coming through the ranks too. And as I've said before in interviews, we played shows with all of those guys, but they were the hard rock and roll, which is what Australian audiences wanted. And here were we coming up playing all these big epic ballads, and we were dressed all in white, you know, because that's what we thought we wanted to do. So we got a lot of flack for that, but we never thought that we weren't going to be successful, you know. Although there are times when we came close to the edge and say, God, we've had enough. But we never did. We kept going because of that early success. When people went, oh, wow. We thought, well, if they did it then, they're going to do it again, you know. And funnily enough, we were signed to CBS for 2 albums, I think. And then another guy, there was a friend of ours, had a record company called Wizard Records. And he said, and he signed us, you know, when we were destitute. This was after we had already had 3 top 10 records in. And I said to him, you know, we're not that popular now. This is like 78. And how come you don't think that the bubbles burst for us? He said, because you've had 3 top 10 records already, and you're going to do it again. He said, if you've done it 3 times, you're going to do it again. And he said, I don't know when it is, but I want to be there when you do. So he signed us, and sure enough, then came Lost in Love, you know. And so it's people having faith in something. I mean, we've always had that faith in something, but we are digressing a bit because it was about songwriting.
No, this is fantastic, actually, because I had questions about that as well. There were certain instrumental people in your career that I felt, you know, look, I consider Peter Dawkins as the one who founded you. There's a great clip of him on YouTube where he talks about you guys coming in, he heard the demo tape, he gave you the contract on the spot. And then I don't know if it was Robbie Porter, but the person who shopped the Lost in Love single to Clive Davis. Were there instrumental people like that you felt like it was luck that they believed in you, and that's how you got forward?
Yeah, you really know your stuff if you know Peter Dawkins and Robbie Porter. Well, here's the thing with Air Supply. We've had incredible luck with us all the time. We just have more than our share than probably we deserve. But we've had rough times too. But this luck that we've had has put us over the edge at so many different times. The first one was meeting Peter Dawkins. When in like 73, when I was playing in folk clubs and stuff, I sent Peter Dawkins, I didn't know him, I sent him some demo tapes, and it was pretty much that whole first album that we did.
Although is it in 73, 1973?
In 73, yeah. Oh. I sent him a cassette tape wrapped up in a plastic bag to EMI Studios in Sydney, addressed to Peter Dawkins. And because he was a big producer, he produced this artist then called Ross Ryan, who was a singer-songwriter, kind of like me, only he was successful. And I sent Peter these tapes, and I thought, well, I'm never going to hear back, but I sent it to 2 or 3 different record companies. And I got replies, and they said, oh, thank you for sending, but we're not interested. But, you know, send us more stuff later on, you know, which is really, in effect, saying no thanks. But I got a letter back from Peter Dawkins, and he said, oh, thank you for sending. He said, the tracks are quite interesting, but at this time, we're not signing any new artists, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, that was nice. So when we were later on, when we were in Sydney, we were shopping everything in 75. He was the last person we went to. We went to every record company, and the last one was CBS, and he was the new A&R guy, artists and repertoire. And it was a new record company for him too. He had had all this success with EMI, but this was CBS. So he was looking for something to get his teeth into. And I remember walking into his office and we played him the demo of Loving on the Bruises and another the B-side to that, If You Knew Me. And we got used to everybody saying, oh, no, we don't have anything. We can't sign you. We're not into this genre at the moment. So we were kind of saying, oh, have a listen to this, and expecting him to say that. And he listened to it on the spot. And he said, wow. He said, this is pretty cool. Bearing in mind, the demo sounded amazing. And it was a little demo. I wish I still had it. It was recorded on a cassette player, a tiny little cassette player. It was live. And we used Frank from the show, who joined us later, the show's drummer. And we just got these people to say, would you play on a track for us? They didn't know the songs. We said, we're going to run it through once. It's really simple. You'll pick it up. And that's how we made the demo. But there was something about it. There was this 3-part harmony between Russell, myself, and Jeremy, who was in the band then. And it just sounded amazing. And he said, wow, this sounds really cool. And he thought about it, and he sat there and he had his hand on his chin, and he said, I'm going to sign you guys. And we were like, oh. So he did. And that was the beginning of a great relationship with Peter. And I told him about the fact that I sent him songs earlier, but I don't think he remembered. But he was a great person. And to answer your question, he was the first guy to come in that was a great mediator for us. He was on our team, and then when we went in to make the album, I didn't even play him the other songs. He says, have you got other songs? I said, oh yeah, I've got lots of songs. He said, okay, we're going to make an album. Loving on the Bruises was already in the charts. We were still in Superstar, and we went in to make an album. We made it in a week, and it was done. And he loved the songs, and so he was on our team, as I said. But he became part of the machine for us. Right. So he really filled us up with positive energy and told us. He said, "Well, you could actually do it, And of course, we did. We became very successful in Australia. We had several hit songs. But our outreach was bigger than that. We wanted, there were bands in Australia at that time that were super big. There's a band called Sherbet that was huge. We kind of wanted to be there, but they were just something else. They were like monstrous in Australia, nowhere else. And when Peter said to us at the peak of our popularity there, early peak, he said, I can make you the biggest band in Australia and bigger than Sherbet, And we said, oh, that's great, but we want to be the biggest band in the world. And I don't know why we said that, because that wasn't usually our MO. We weren't that flippant or big-headed. We never were, but we just felt that's what we wanted to do. And it took us a long time to do it, but he was the first person. And then he left the scene. We got dropped from CBS after I know what it was. We went with Rod, we opened for Rod Stewart, which was another key person with us. And it was great for us because it was the connection to the US. And when Rod first came when we first saw him, he came backstage. I actually saw him. We all went out as he was going on. And we'd just done our show, and I think it was in Adelaide. And we did a great show. We were really popular in Australia, the fans were going for it. But this was the biggest crowd we'd ever played to. It was like 20,000 people outside. And we were there waiting, for Rod to go on backstage, and we felt like really important. And then he came out with the band, and they were all in cloaks. They looked like bloody the Avengers or something. And Carmine Appice, who's a very famous drummer, came up to me. He said, "What a great show, man!" I went, "Oh, really?" And I thought, yeah. And then Rod was right there, and he came up, and Russell and I were standing there. And I was looking out at the crowd, and then suddenly Rod Stewart's next to me, and I turned and I almost died. I went, "Oh my God, I'm standing next to Rod Stewart, you know." And he turned and he said, "Great show, man," you know. And I went, "Oh," you know. Rod Stewart actually spoke to me, and I was freaking out. And that was the beginning of another great friendship, a relationship. But it was the, you know, watching his show. I'd seen a couple of shows in Australia a few years before. I saw the Stones and Elton John. And for people that came from the US, it seemed, they just had something about them. They had this attitude, which was a great attitude, but they had this vibe, you know, that I hadn't seen before. And I wanted to be a part of it. So, you know, we did all our shows with Rod, and, you know, then Rod said, "I want you to open for me next year in the US." And we went, wow. We said, we thought our show was good, but we didn't think it was that good. We were still very green. We were only a few months old. But anyway, we did the shows, and we went to the US with Rod, which was wonderful. We became very good friends with his whole entourage. And when we came back after 6 months, we thought, oh, we're going to get a ticker tape parade. You know, nobody had ever done that. We thought, you know, they'll probably give us an OBE or something. But they'd forgotten all about us. It was ridiculous, you know.
Right.
And in fact, Russell will confirm this. When we came back, that band Sherbet were actually coming back at the same time from a show in somewhere else in Australia. And Russell heard all these fans screaming and stuff. And he said, wow, they know we're coming back. And we walked out into the immigration area. And of course, they were all Sherbet fans. And we walked out and there was nobody there. And we went, oh my God, when we felt dejected. But nevertheless, we really saw it as an opportunity. We said, we just got back from the US, which is where we wanted to be. And suddenly we were back in Australia, which is great, by the way. But suddenly there was nothing going on. What happened to the playing at Madison Square Garden and the Spectrum and all these great plays with Rod? Suddenly we didn't even have any of these grotty pubs to play in. So we were right at the bottom. We had no record deal. We got dropped by CBS. So we had to start again. And the only reason we had the fortitude to start again was because of where we'd been. We'd been to the US. We'd seen what it was like. We'd experienced it, and we wanted to get back there. The only way to get back there was to do the same thing. And it all begins with the songs. And I knew that. I learned that a long time before that. So we had to get the songs, you know, and that was my job, a job which I loved. And so I went, none of us had any money. I just went away thinking about things, and I started to write the songs again, which would be our next album.
Do you have any thoughts about, there was the recording of the songs from 76 and 70. The whole thing started in Air Supply that was done in the US by Jimmy Horowitz.
Yeah.
And I always felt it was very interesting. I don't know what it was. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I never quite liked that album as much as I liked the Australian versions of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't know it's the same songs, but I don't know if it was overproduced. Or I don't know if you have any reflections on why that album didn't break through.
I do, but I felt that same angst when I was there recording that. You know, I mean, for Lovin' on the Bruises, for instance, is just a slam dunk. It's a hit song. It's a hit record. It was already a hit in Australia, and I thought, well, in the US, if we do the same thing, it's going to have the same result. But that was wrong, which I learned. He hired a band. He didn't use our band, which was a mistake. They should have used the same tracks, but they wanted to use different musicians. The musicians were good, but they didn't understand the songs, and they were more interested in playing a groovy bass line or being at the cool rhythm section, because they all knew each other. And the songs were too anchored too much. There was too much emphasis on the rhythm section instead of the song. And I felt that, and I'd say that to Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, you know, it's sounding very lethargic and very bottom heavy. And he said, no, it's great, it's great. And both Russell and I fought that, but that's what we had. Plus, CBS really didn't want to make that album with us. They were kind of forced into it by Rod's management, Billy Gaff. He said, well, they're opening for us. And I know that Warner Brothers said, well, we've got 100 bands that could open for Rod. And they says, no, we want this one. And we need an album. So they bludgeoned them into making a record. So they didn't really want it. And it didn't sound that great. It's a great reflection of the time and the moment. And there was some great moments on it. But you're right, it didn't have the bounce and the freshness of the 76 album, you know.
Yeah. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I was trying to listen to them side by side the other day. But something, when I heard the 76 album, I had a whole other impression of those songs. And
they're just different versions of the song. I prefer every track. I prefer on the original, you know. But I learned that lesson. You know, you don't need to recreate something. If something's really good, you don't need to recreate it. It's already there. Right. You know? Because when you do that, you lose things. You know. Right.
Exactly. Graham, I don't know if you were aware of this, but there was a fan that unearthed your very, very first concert in America, October 3rd, 1977, Seattle, Washington. And there's a recording of that opening for Rod Stewart. So it's an incredible, the differences between that era and then the Arista years. I was wondering if you could reflect on that, because it's a different band. It's a different sound.
Yeah, it is. It is a different band. And we put the band together, because we didn't use the band from 76, the Australian band. Oh, we had Nigel, the drummer, we brought with us. But everybody else, you know, we thought, well, it'd be expensive to bring everybody over, which was a mistake. But then we'd have to put them up and pay them per diems and all kinds of stuff. And we just didn't have a lot of money. We didn't make a lot of money with Rod. No opening act did or does still. But so we put this band together. The band was cool. But I think on reflection now, I think the band was more interested in being in a band that's opening for Rod Stewart. He was the biggest act in the world. So they were more interested in being part of that than in creating something around Air Supply to push them forward. But we had a great time, and the shows were really cool. But that one I heard too.
You did. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad that somebody recorded that. I mean, the recording is it's from 77, you can tell. But I actually need to get a good copy of it, if it exists, and clean it up. But I was surprised. I mean, it sounded pretty good, you know. We never had a sound check ever with Rod. Our stuff was just thrown on stage, and we went out and played. And we tuned up before we got on. But by the time we got on stage, we were always out of tune. So we stood there tuning up, which we would never do now. When I heard that audio, I thought, oh my God, we have learned quite a lot. I would never do this. I would never do that. You know. But when we started, it was pretty cool. And, you know, it's a good reference point for us at that point.
In listening, when I got to hear your sound through a good pair of headphones, I was really amazed, especially in the Arista records, with the vocalizations and the orchestrations, and hearing like Russell sing multiple lines and the overdubbing and the process of creating some of those records. They're simple songs, but extraordinary in the way that they came together. And it would be great to dive in at some point and just to learn about the recording process, especially with the hit records.
Yeah. Well, at that point, you know, I didn't know anything about music production, and I still don't know that much, to be quite honest. But I was learning pretty fast, but I was learning from the heavyweights, you know. Robbie Porter came in and, you know, he remixed All Out of Love, which had already been a hit in Australia 2 years earlier, but he knew it was going to be a hit. And you know, I came to the US. Russell stayed in Australia because we already had his vocal. They had mine too, but he wanted to do all these other harmonies and things. And I remember he had two-inch machines, the 24-track machines, slaved together. And it was a real kind of, it wasn't agonizing, but we were in the studio for days, maybe 2 weeks on the same track. And he kept, rewind the track and do another take. And in those days, on the analog machines, it takes like 30 seconds for it to rewind and then lock with the other machine. So you're sitting there and you're going, oh my God, now it's instant. And then there was fear that the tape might stretch because he was rewinding it so many times. And, I had to put a harmony here and something else on there. And in the end, when it was done, I thought, oh my God, what a relief. But nevertheless, it sounded fabulous. But it wasn't till, because we had that track. Then we went in with Harry Maslin,
yes,
who was a very famous record producer. And he did some tracks too on that first album. And it was great to watch him because he just did everything with such ease, And once again, he brought some pretty hit players in that I didn't know, but I knew their reputation, like David Hungate, who was the bass player from Toto. Yep. And I think he had the drummer from Toto in there. But he had all these guys because he wanted to make sure that the tracks were really cool. And I understand that, but it was great being with those guys and watching them play and then actually playing with them. I had my acoustic in there and all these legendary session guys with it. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm not going to be able to do my thing. But, I did it and they followed me. So that was a great exercise. But to watch Harry do his thing, just all these millions of buttons on a big analog SSL desk was quite the thrill. And he knew what he wanted. Really, I was just a fly on the wall, both Russell and I. Russell was out then, of course. And we were just watching and he would say, oh, go and jump in and sing a harmony on this or a harmony on that, Every Woman in the World, whatever. And we would do that. And it was a great time. It was like the pressure was off us, because somebody was taking control of the production, I've never really been into that, to be quite honest, and I'm still not. It's just not my thing. And so I'm very happy when somebody comes in and takes that role. But Harry Maslin was a master, and he would come to Australia every year and we would make an album, and we'd tour for 9 months. Then around Christmas time, we would go back to Australia and he would come and we'd arrive, and we'd pick him up at the airport, take him to the Siebel townhouse where everybody stayed. And he'd say, have you got the songs? I say, yeah, I got the songs. And that's all he would say to me. I say, yeah, I've got them. And he'd go, okay. And then next day we'd start in the studio and with the real band. And it was such a thrill because you saw everything evolve. And I'd do a piano demo right there or a guitar demo. And the whole guys and Russell would be kind of waiting, going, okay, what's it going to be? And I would play him 10 songs, kind of rough and out of tune, but they'd okay, let's do it, and we get to work and a few days later, all the songs would be there. It's great.
And then you brought Harry back for The Earth Is, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we did. We brought him back every year around Christmas time. And we spent about 2 months in the studio to record an album for the following year. So it became touring for 9 months, go back to Australia, make an album. That album would come out. Then we would tour again with that album. And that went on for several years. It was like a cyclic thing. But it was great, everybody was waiting for what we would do next. And thankfully, we had great stuff coming all the time, We had the One That You Love album, then we had Now and Forever, which I really liked too. And that's when things started to go not a bit weird. We just didn't get played as much on the radio. But, we had a great time at that point and things changed for us You know, we decided we wanted to go to some. We kind of toured everywhere where bands normally tour, bands that were as popular as we were at that time. You know, all over the US. We went to Japan, and which was great, and South America. But we wanted to go to other places where nobody had been before, and we thought, well, we were told that if we were going to do that, our music was the perfect music to do it. Like it was, everybody loved it. It wasn't like it was heavy metal where you can only go, if you're a heavy metal band, you probably go to Norway or Scandinavia, where that kind of stuff was very prominent in those times.
Right. But
we wanted to go into China and Vietnam and see some things that people hadn't seen, you know. So that's what we did. And I remember when we first went to Colombia in South America, we had shows in Bogota and Cali, and very few bands had been down there. This is almost 45 years ago, I remember. But we went to another city, I can't remember the name of it, and they had real streets, you know. But when we landed at this kind of funky airport, we had all our gear there, the band was there, and they put us on an open air bus, a coach, and we went through the town like at 10 miles an hour. And the promoter wanted, it was like we were the royal family, and everybody came out of their houses and stood at the gate, and they had dogs and they were holding babies and cats and stuff, and everybody came out and they were waving. And we were going, oh, wow, this is a trippy thing. And that went on for like an hour. We went all over this town and people came out and were cheering, at banners. So it was that kind of thing that we enjoyed and wanted to do. And we went all over South America. I think we were the first Western band in Paraguay and Uruguay. Wow. And we certainly were the first in Vietnam since a lot of other bands were there during the war, the Vietnamese War. A lot of Australian bands went there. But this was the first time a major band had been there. And that was a trippy vibe. We had to sit in front of all these generals when we got there at the venue the day we got in. Normally when we fly into a foreign country, we're like a day off. But we had to go and meet all these generals, and none of them spoke a word of English. And they all had their uniforms on, and they all had all medals here and in front of this thing. And we were behind this big long table. And they said, we want to see your show before you do your show. And I said, what do you mean? You must perform your show like now. And the gear was already set up. And they didn't have a piano. We said, well, we need an electric piano. And they got this funky old piano from the back of the theater that was buried in like 3 feet of dust. And it was out of tune, and it was all wonky. And that was going to be the piano for the show, and it was. And but we said, no, we don't. We do a sound check tomorrow. You're very welcome to come to that. And they said, no, you have to perform the whole show. We need to see it to make sure it's not anything that the Vietnamese people don't want to watch. And we said, well, there's a problem, you know. And they said, well, you have to do it, you know, or you're going to stay here. But we stuck to our guns, and we had interpreters. And I said, I said, tell them we're not doing it. And we're going to sit here all night if we have to, but we do not and will not play. We'll play tomorrow for the people. And they all sat there. But we didn't play, and we left. But the day of the show, that same old funky piano was there. And they built this stage. And right as was it Frank? I can't remember if it was Frank or not. Came out, and a couple of the planks, the stage gave way. So the piano suddenly went, and it was like this for the whole show. And Frank was on an angle like this, but we played it, But that was part of the whole thing of being somewhere where nobody had been before. And I'm going to tell you one more instance. When we first went to we were the first band to tour China. I think it was 96. And they said, and it was a big basketball arena. It was like 15,000 seats. We sold out. And we go there and they said, well, all around the perimeter of the seats, they were all armed guards. And they told us, it says, the army's going to be there. They all had machine guns. And they were spaced about every 6 feet facing the audience in case anybody wanted to clap or stand up. And they said, they're not allowed, they would clap at the end of the show, but they're not allowed to clap during the performance. Oh, really? And they said, yeah, one thing you cannot do, you cannot go into the audience at any point. And because we would go out for the one you love, as we always did. And so we came to the one that you love, and I wanted to go out, but there were guards on the stage. And as soon as I moved, he said, no, you can't go. So anyway, the end of the show came and they were applauding and the guards were still there. And Russell and I turned to each other and I said, we got to go into the audience, because the show was over. What are they going to do? Put us in jail? So I said to him, let's go now. So we went down the exit from the stage, but instead of going to the dressing room, we went out into the crowd, and all the soldiers there, the army with the guns, they didn't know what to do. They were like, what do I do? So they just put their guns down, and we went all around the audience waving and shouting, and the fans were standing up and screaming. So we got our way in the end, But that was a great thing. It was like, yeah, let's do it. We had to do something.
Yeah.
We didn't want to just be told what to do. We had to do something else,
Well, that's a testament to the care that you have for the fans, and it's it's part of who you guys are.
Yeah, it's all about the fans for us, It always has been, and that's to step out on the stage and see everybody tears and laughing and having a great time. That's what it's all about, because we are one of them. We are one of them. Certainly, we're not anything other than that. We are just people that come a traveling band that comes to people's cities and plays. That's what we are. Nothing more than that.
Now, one of your fans was Princess Diana. You talked about that, and interestingly, UK market was not one that was friendly towards Air Supply, but yet she had the album, obviously, but that's where you're from, and that always puzzled me, because the UK is a great lover of these kinds of music.
I know, it's bizarre. I mean, All Out of Love was a top 10 record there. Demis Roussos covered Lost in Love about 78 or something. He had a big hit with it in Europe. So I would have thought that would help us get into there. But for some reason, it just never clicked. And it's one of the biggest mysteries of our career, because there are artists we know, like Michael Bolton, for instance, who's not dissimilar to us, who's a great artist. He goes to the UK and Europe all the time. And we get so jealous when we see him playing in Sweden and France, Italy, Germany, and we can't play there. And I think, why is that? Because the music is certainly there, the songs are there, and I don't know what it is. We played a show maybe 10 or 12 years ago. We said, we want to go and play there, even if we lose money, which we did. We played in Hamburg, and we played in Italy somewhere. I can't remember where it was. And we got there, and it was like nobody knew who we were. Even the promoter was, when we came, we like certain things when we get there, and there was nothing. And I think about 30 people came to each show, and we knew, but we wanted to play there. However, the people that came were really into it. But playing to 30 people is kind of soul destroying, but we knew it and we wanted to do it, and we lost money, but that's okay. We wanted to play there, and we still do.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've always thought that eventually we will be able to go there and play properly how we'd like to with all our equipment and everything. And I've always thought that we will ultimately do that, although I'm not so sure anymore. You know,
I thought it was. I thought it was Arista. I thought it was that maybe they weren't promoting you in the UK, like some of the other artists. But
well, they weren't. You know, we went to do. We did a lot of TV there. We went to do TV in Germany and Italy. This in the Arista years, in like '83, even when we were very popular.
Huge.
But it still didn't go. I don't know why. And I remember being in Germany at a TV show, and the show was all about Lost in Love, and a couple had been away from each other for like 30 years, and they'd found each other again. So it was all around Lost in Love. And I thought, oh, this is going to explode. It was a national show in Germany, which meant that the surrounding countries would get it too: Italy, France, Switzerland. And we did the show, and there was this guy that was in this big long trench coat and a trilby, and he was kind of standing away from everybody. I thought, God, who's that guy? And he was on the stairs on his own, and he was just kind of doing that. You know, you couldn't tell who it was. And I went up to him and I said, you know, excuse me, are you part of the show? And he said, yeah. And it was Elton John. and as soon as he looked up, and he said, yeah. I went, wow. I said, oh, lovely to me. I said, sorry to intrude. And he said, oh, no, it's great. He was just there on his own, you know, doing a song on piano. But that was the highlight of that tour. But we did all the TV, but we just didn't break. And it's a mystery. And even now, our manager, Barry, we talk about it now and again. And we say, well, we want to go back to Europe, but we have to be prepared for it to not be successful, you know. I don't know if we're at that stage anymore where we want to do that, you know. Barry probably would be not very receptive for us doing that.
Did your family get to, you know, in Harvey's interview, you talked about your dad and your sister and aunt, and did they get an opportunity to see you? They must have been incredibly proud, you know, to see your success. And
yeah, well, I have one sister that lives in Jamaica, and we do a charity show every 2 years. What we did before COVID for Children's Hospital there, and we donate everything and play for nothing, and we've created this great children's hospital ward. Now they have computers, air conditioning, and beds, and incubators, and they never had any of that before. But anyway, so we go there every 2 years. So I see her, but my other sister and my dad have seen me in Australia in earlier years, of course.
Yep.
And it was funny when we were, I think it was 85 or something. We were playing in Australia, and it was like a command performance, and we played, and after the show, my dad was there in the tux, and he was really proud, you know.
I'm sure.
And he had his all the gear on, and we were having a chat after the show, and my dad was kind of blown away. He was like, "Oh my God," you know. And this gentleman comes up to us, and he taps me on the shoulder, and he said, "Excuse me, I'd like to say hello," you know. And I thought, yeah, sure. And it's the Prime Minister of Australia. And my dad saw him, and he said, "That's the Prime Minister." I said, "Oh, of course, come on over," you know. So he met my dad, and he was kind of chuffed. So there were moments like that I'll never forget. Of course, my dad's he's gone now, but so I'm thankful that he saw us, and I know Russell's family saw us too in a great time.
Yeah,
his mum and dad and his sister. Funnily enough, they saw us, so it was good, you know.
I know you guys came from hard, you know, backgrounds and didn't have a lot. So I'm thinking, you know, your parents and family must have been so thrilled. I know your mom had passed, but they must have been very proud to achieve what you achieved. It must have been amazing.
It was, you know, and I'm still very proud of that. I wish my mother had seen the show. It would have been something else. but wasn't to be. But, you know, I would like to play in my hometown of Nottingham. There's a beautiful theatre there where everybody used to play and still does, called the Theatre Royal.
Yeah.
And I'd love to play there, but I don't know if it's going to happen, you know, because I know I'm the most, and I don't mean this in an egotistical way, I know I'm the most successful musician ever to come out of Nottingham by a long shot. Yeah. And I wish we could go back there and I could play to a Nottingham audience and go, okay, guys, you know, I'm from 3 miles away. Yeah, I'd like that. Yeah. But I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll see.
Yeah. There's a ton of material that has never been released from Air Supply and from what you've done. Songs like Stand Up and, you know, Crazy Love, which was the B-side of Just As I Am, never made it to digital. Labor of Love, Innocent Eyes from the 84 years. Is there any chance, many of the fans want to know if we're ever going to get that? They're bootlegs running around, but we want to know if we will ever get an opportunity to get the recordings.
I think there's a strong possibility of that, especially now, you know, after all this time. I mean, I have pretty much all the whole library of everything we've done downstairs in my studio, and I go back through it sometimes. I have a lot of tapes, a lot of live shows from obscure places that nobody's ever heard. There's one in particular that is really good. We played a live show. It was in Connecticut somewhere. I think it was 1982. And we did a live satellite broadcast. And in those days, a satellite broadcast was like, whoa, we're going to Mars or something. But we did it, and it was straight to disc. And they made 2 discs, 2 actual vinyl discs of the whole show. And I have one of them. And I think the other one got destroyed because the producer of the show died maybe 10 years ago. And I think it died with him. But I have the other one. And I thought, well, I should release this. And so there's a lot of stuff like that I thought was worthy of that. Especially, you know, we went to Montserrat, I think in 1985 or something.
Heard about that.
Yeah, it was a wonderful time, but we didn't get any work done. We did, but we recorded about 12 tracks. Innocent Eyes was one, and Labor of Love, things like that. And so I have all that stuff. But, you know, things have moved on since then. I mean, technology is different. And that place in particular, I loved. We had a great time there. And the studio was beautiful. And we went there because one of the main reasons was we knew the police did synchronicity there. And we knew they were there doing that. I thought, wow, I want to go there and experience that vibe, you know. And we did. And it was wonderful. But the stuff we got out of there was a bit strange. It wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. That's why we didn't release anything from it, you know.
Yeah, and that was the question I had because, you know, 84 was was a year and you had so much material, like I Can Wait Forever. And
yeah,
a lot of this stuff could have been released. And I think as fans, it was a hard one because we were hearing these in the shows and hearing I Can Wait Forever off the Ghostbusters soundtrack, but they weren't released. And it just felt like, that there could have been a great album that year.
It could have. I mean, with that in particular, that time, you know, it's funny when you mention a certain song, my mind goes back to that moment when the people I'm working with. And I remember that was David Foster.
Yeah.
And Jay Grady.
Yeah.
And they just came up and asked us, say, are you interested in writing a song for the Ghostbusters soundtrack with those 2 guys? And of course, yeah. And, you know, to work with David is a treasure anyway, and Jay. And we just went to Jay's studio in the valley in Los Angeles, in Toluca Lake somewhere. And he had this massive studio in there. And it was like going into another dimension. At the front is his tiny house. You walk in, it's like huge. And he said, okay, we're going to write a song for the Ghostbusters. So we did. We had no concept or anything. And we just did it there. And an hour later, we had I Can Wait Forever. Although, yeah, I actually went, he said, oh, we had all the music. And he said, well, what about the lyrics? And I said, well, I need to be on my own for the lyrics. So I took a walk for a couple of hours around the neighborhood while they were laying the piano down and everything, because we recorded it right there and then. And I came back with the lyrics about 2 hours later, and I said, well, I don't know if they're right. I knew they were right. And we recorded it, yeah. But you're right. I've thought of bringing that song, but I've always loved that song.
It's beautiful.
So
it could have been a hit. I mean, I just felt so strongly. It should have been a hit. And it was released as a single in Japan. And I couldn't figure out why wouldn't Clive release it in the US. It
was weird because it was the three of us, myself, Jay and David, kind of 3 powerhouses at that time. The song sounded fantastic. And the Ghostbusters album was on Arista. I don't know why they didn't release it.
Was there decisions by Clive? Like, was he the one kind of deciding what to do?
He made all those decisions,
Got it, yeah.
Yeah, nothing happened without Clive knowing about it. It was usually his decision to do things, but he was right on all the time,
Yeah. Well, Graham, thank you so much. I extended my time by half an hour selfishly.
Oh, it's all right. Cool.
I enjoyed every second of it, and it was amazing to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm glad we got to do it, and hopefully in the future we'll do it again when there's a few more questions people want to ask. All right. Well, thank you so much. I've had a great time. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It was amazing.
Okay. Bye-bye to everyone too.